Amazon isn't and has never been a price leader. They're a price follower. Amazon will always match prices to give the customer the best experience possible. And Amazon doesn't care whether it's a $20 product that's crap quality or whether it's $100. They care about where's the conversion, where are they going to make the most money, where's the consumer clicking on a page and wanting to buy.
Welcome back to That Amazon Ads podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. We're going to be talking about Vendor Central, and we're joined by Stephen Knock, as always. Stephen, how are you doing today?
Doing well, man. Excited for this guest.
Heck yeah. And with us today, we have a former vendor manager from Amazon. He worked at Amazon for 4 years. I actually worked closely with this person for a couple of years, so I got to see firsthand their expertise in this field. Currently is a sales director over at Entero Digital, their digital marketing agency. But yeah, Josh, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, you bet. Good to be here. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So Josh, this is a topic that we haven't really talked about on the podcast. Most of the stuff we're talking about is ads, and a lot of it's really related to like Seller Central. A lot of the people listening are brands and they use Seller Central, but your background is primarily in Vendor Central. So could you just start off and just give us a real basic breakdown of like what the differences are between Seller Central and Vendor Central?
Yeah, for sure. So Vendor Central is the platform that is used by Amazon to buy directly from manufacturers. So it typically they're buying from larger manufacturers. It has kind of morphed into more of a relationship between Amazon and their key clients versus back 10, 20 years ago. Everyone could get on Vendor Central. And over the years, they realized they can't manage a large number of manufacturers that is constantly growing. And so eventually they, started making more of a push for manufacturers to sell on Seller Central through the FBA platform using, fulfillment by Amazon. And also kind of in a way nudging some of the smaller manufacturers to, have an alternate way to do business on the platform without having to, need a vendor manager internally to achieve that business. And so, what it looks like today is quite a bit different than what it looked like in the past, simply because Amazon really gives the attention to those larger manufacturers, and it has made it more difficult on the smaller ones. Let me get into a little bit also of talking about the difference, because you asked what the difference is between vendor and seller. So seller is a platform for sellers to use Amazon's fulfillment network and ship product into Amazon's fulfillment centers and take advantage of Prime badging, while at the same time continuing to being able to control price. So instead of selling directly to Amazon, they own the price. They own every aspect of it, and Amazon just fulfills it. So they pay Amazon for a fee. And then the alternate way to do business on Seller Central is through FBM, and that's where sellers are fulfilling product themselves, essentially drop shipping, but they're not. Neither of those on Seller Central is selling directly to Amazon. So that's the difference.
Gotcha. So vendors, they're selling directly to Amazon. Amazon now owns the inventory, and then they're reselling it on their platform versus seller. The seller owns all the inventory, just using that fulfillment. Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, not everybody has worked with both vendor and seller. I know you have worked with both. Stephen and I have both worked with these different accounts. So appreciate you giving that background on that. And so I'm curious, initially when vendor started, it was just like an invite only program, right?
Yeah. And honestly, that's still the way that it is. It has become even more so an invite only program than in years past. So that's part of the changes I was talking about before. Mm-hmm. Now, so one might say, okay, well, I know, so-and-so seller that sells directly to Amazon. But I think the key here is, do they actually have a relationship with Amazon? Do they have someone that's managing their brand? They have someone that they talk to on a day-to-day basis about that relationship and about those purchase orders that are coming in. And chances are, if they're kind of in a smaller range of sales, the answer is going to be no. So Amazon has different thresholds depending on category of, where you have to be in terms of sales or growth rate, right? You can have slightly less sales than where that threshold is, but be growing at a rate where they've identified you as a strategic partner that they want to have a relationship with, and then you'll get access to a buyer. So, but today for those for those manufacturers that are selling directly to Amazon that don't have that relationship, it's really, really difficult. So yes, they might have access to Vendor Central, but there's a lot that's going to be really difficult about that. And they're, trying to figure out how to continue to do business in that way when not having those same, that same access as some of the larger companies that do have that buyer.
Yeah.
So Josh, not just anybody can be a vendor. Sounds like, is Amazon still actively reaching out and inviting new sellers to the vendor platform, or is this kind of like halted, or where's that at right now?
Good question. I do think that there are some, outbound efforts from Amazon to get new vendors, but I think they're much more strategic about it than they used to be. Specifically for the reasons I was kind of talking about in terms of growth and sales. So who they target now, in my experience, is brands that are really, really well established, that they've likely targeted, over the course of years, brands that haven't historically sold to Amazon because of XYZ reason. One example of this that I think is really well known is Nike. Right. So Amazon has always gone after Nike to sell directly to them. And, I think they did for a point of time. But, there are larger manufacturers that have certain issues with selling directly to Amazon. Some of those issues have to do with pricing. And in the fact that Amazon, controls pricing, and most manufacturers have pricing policies that they don't want broken, right? And Amazon holds fast to rules that, you can't price fix, and you can't ask them to price fix. And larger brands that can't have that relationship where they can control pricing, they don't want to be on a platform where, a retailer won't respect that. And then others, again, have an issue with brand gating, and the fact that Amazon lets anyone under the sun come onto the platform and sell, their products, and they don't like that either, right? Because they don't have that control, and so they won't sell to Amazon because they don't like that Amazon won't gate their brand and lets everyone else sell.
Yeah. So Josh, speaking of these pricing programs with Vendor Manager, I'm currently working with a vendor account. Andrew and I have been co-working on another vendor account, and the issue that always comes up, there's multiple issues, but I think one of the biggest issues that Amazon does is Amazon will suppress the prices of these products. They'll cut them despite what the vendors are trying to say. Like the brands are saying, here's the MSRP, here's where it's listed on all of our other websites. For whatever reason, Amazon lowers the prices, and then Amazon punishes the ads and won't let us deliver ads on these products. And so we'll have like a top selling product, right? This product's remarkable, goes for $40. Amazon drops it to 30 and then tells the advertiser, hey, because we lowered the price of your product, we're no longer profitable on it. So we're not going to let you run ads on it unless if you lower your cost to us. But we're like, we didn't ask you to lower that price, and now we can't advertise anymore. So then we lose all of the ranking, and then we lose the organic ranking, and then it just kills this product. And we're just like, what the heck, Amazon?
Yep. I deal with this on a daily basis as well with my clients. This is a huge challenge for manufacturers, selling to Amazon. So as far as pricing goes, Amazon would state, if, I was a buyer, talking to you today, I would say Amazon isn't and has never been a price leader, right? 99% of the time, Amazon is not defining price. They're a price follower. So, and what that means is Amazon will always match prices to give the customer the best experience possible, right? Because they don't want a customer to come on their site and see a price listed at full retail and then go on another retailer's site, that's a key competitor, and find a much lower price. And so they will price everyone on site who is selling on the Amazon platform, because those are most visible and customers are going to see those other offers within a certain range, right? If they can't match a price because they're going to, lose too much money on it, and it's high enough volume that it's got visibility and, it's going to move the needle, they will seed the buy box. And that's where you have a lost buy box. And, Amazon will ultimately cut off how low they're going to go and just keep a certain price and let someone else win the buy box until they're out of inventory or, something changes. But as far as the cases where they do drop the price, one, again, price matching internally, price matching externally. They're not going to price match everyone externally. They've got, within every category and every brand, they've got, certain competitors externally that they're going to match. So, we'll go back to the Nike example, and let's say Nike's selling to Amazon, and, they've got a pair of shoes listed at $100, and Dick's Sporting Goods, drops that price to $90. Amazon's going to go and match that price at $90, assuming there's still margin there and whatnot. But if Joe Schmo's shoestore.com goes and lowers their price, they're not going to match them, right? Because they have very little visibility and they're not a key competitor of Amazon. And so those are two reasons they'll drop the price. Now, there are a few fringe cases where they do drop prices and they are price leading. One of those, and these are fringe cases again, this is the exception to the rule. One is when there's no list price in the system. So as a manufacturer, you are responsible for uploading a listing and putting in not just the cost, but also where you want that price listed. Why that's not always mandatory and it can be blank, I don't know, but sometimes it is. So that's the first thing you want to check if a price is below retail is, do I have a list price set up in the system? A second case would be if they're determining that, there's, and this is kind of crazy, but sometimes they'll determine that the price is too high, and that difference between cost and retail is too much, and they don't need all of that margin, and it doesn't really make sense where it's priced. And so they will drop the price to be at a more appropriate level. Again, another fringe case. And yet another case is where, inventory hits overstock. This is pretty rare because, Amazon orders on replenishment on a weekly basis, whereas a lot of companies will cut a lot more bulk buys. Amazon does that too, but most frequently they're cutting purchase orders on a replenishment cycle on a very regular cadence. And so they've got a pretty fine-tuned forecasting system where they understand how much inventory they need to not be in an overstock position. But, sometimes some things happen. Amazon systems aren't perfect. Sometimes they cut orders for too many units because they're buying in bulk on discount. And they're in Q4 and then Q4 ends and they didn't move through all that inventory. And so it's January and they're stuck with too much. And so then it goes into a status of overstock. And so they will drop the price until they increase demand just enough to tell the system, okay, now the forecast has changed and, we can move through these units and our system doesn't think it's overstocked anymore. And so that price will adjust back up. So, yeah.
Very interesting. I love that. That's cool. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, Steven, the last one that he mentioned, that last kind of fringe case sounds like kind of what we're dealing with that one account that we work on.
Yep.
But,
yeah.
But Josh, for these vendors that are kind of dealing with this, obviously price control and being able to control prices is the main lever that you don't have access to on Vendor Central. Do you have any strategies, any recommendations or thoughts around how to go about that process with Amazon and get even, get some price increases where you need or just maybe a little insight into that process and what that looks like?
Yeah, for sure. So, this is, I would say, probably the number one challenge of any manufacturer, large or small, selling directly to Amazon is how to get cost increases and how to be comfortable in that situation. So the bottom line is if you don't have a direct contact at Amazon, cost increases are almost impossible. It's the chances of it happening are very, very unlikely. It does on occasion work when you input them into the system, where Amazon again decides they don't actually need that much margin, and sometimes it will just trigger an automatic increase. We've seen it happen, but it's rare. Most frequently, cost increases, in my experience, will only happen with that direct contact with a buyer who has that strategic relationship, and they'll negotiate. And even in those cases, Amazon is not just going to increase the price because you asked. And some of the relationships that I have with some of my clients, it will take them 9 months to get a cost increase across, and those negotiations to actually follow through and end with a cost increase, right? That's very strategic on Amazon's part, right? They will use every argument under the sun to not increase your price. They'll say, we haven't actually seen an increase in average retails for your product across different sales channels. And so until we see that average list price increase, we're not going to buy at a higher price, because everyone else buys in bulk. And so they're sitting on all this inventory and can continue to get that margin, where we buy out of replenishment. And so, we have to take that hit a lot quicker than they do. And they'll say, you're just giving us a blanket increase. The price increase isn't driven by, actual commodities increases or labor increases or your factories increasing your costs. You're just trying to pass on a price increase to get more margin. And so, these are just a couple of the examples of arguments they'll give, even in those established relationships with their strategic partners. So, margin is always a huge conversation internally at Amazon, as with any company, but they'll fight tooth and nail to not have to give away their margin.
Yeah. So I got a big question on that one. So, yeah, and this has actually been a big learning moment for me in the last 6 months. I've realized, in terms of everything on Amazon, driving performance, driving total sales, you always have to be, even considering product ranking, all the stuff, at the end of the day, it comes back to what makes Amazon richer, right? Whatever you can do with your product that can make Amazon richer is going to go well for you. And lately, the major issue that I've seen showing up with a lot of my brands, but even worse on the vendors, it's been harder on vendors than anyone else. Everyone's been talking about this big influx of Chinese manufacturers cutting out the American brands who've been sourcing from them to sell on Amazon. And now these manufacturers are just going D2C, popping up random brand names. It looks like they reached into a Scrabble bag and pulled out a bunch of random letters, put them all in caps, and that's the brand name, right? So we have all these popping up here, and they're undercutting everybody. And Amazon loves it, because Amazon's making great margins on them. They're getting great sales volume. And it's way more difficult, practically impossible, for vendors who don't even have control over their retail pricing. And some of the vendors I work with, they're trying to implement MAP or trying to implement price cuts or whatever, but the whole thing's just so extremely difficult. So all of this is context to my question, which I think there's 2 or 3 questions within this. Number one is, from what you've seen, and maybe it's stuff that even it's beyond your time at Amazon, and now you have new thoughts where if you could do it over again, what would your recommendation be to these vendors? Because clearly Amazon's not getting as good of a margin from them, so Amazon's just pushing them out of business. So what would your advice be to them? And then secondly, maybe that advice is for them to go from vendor central to seller central. So I guess, can you speak to both of those things? Number one, if they're going to stay on vendor, what should they do? And number two, should they perchance move to perhaps move to seller central, and where they can have a bit more control over their margins, and maybe it's a win-win for everyone? I don't know.
Yeah. So let me break that up a little bit, and we'll talk about first, what that landscape looks like now at Amazon. So you're exactly right. What's happening is pretty crazy, and I do think it's happening on other marketplaces too. But obviously, Amazon, it's where there's the most visibility to this issue. So One stat that we always tell, our clients, and it might be a little bit outdated and irrelevant now, but as of last year and the year before, the stat was that about 2/3 of all sellers on Amazon have come onto the platform in the last 6 years. So,
Sheesh.
Which is crazy because it has exploded and it's exponential, the seller growth on Amazon. So the bottom line is there that, every Chinese, manufacturer has probably multiple brands and is selling every product under the sun that they can to see what sticks and where they can get to the top of search results. And quite frankly, like a lot of them are gaming the system. When you go to look at reviews, if you actually dig into those reviews, sometimes you'll come across products. Even as a consumer, I see this, but if you're really looking for it, you'll see it all the time. You'll come across products where you'll start, and a particular product might have, 10, 20,000 reviews on it at, 4.5 stars. And you go start looking at the reviews and you start seeing reviews for a completely different product, right?
Right.
So there are a lot of black hat methods, a lot of bots that are used. None of these things are technically allowed by Amazon, but a lot of them still make it through, right? And this is how all of these sellers are gaming the system to get to the top of search results. So how do you compete with that? I mean, I think that this issue goes beyond just Amazon. It's a broader issue of, allowing these sellers to sell on a US marketplace, and take away from, brands that have been around a long time and have gone about business the right way legally. But that aside, how does one compete in that environment? I would say I do think that there is an understanding, at least a basic understanding from, US consumers that this is the Amazon landscape now. We are, as consumers, understanding more as we research products on Amazon that, okay, this is a product that's clearly, an opening price point, bottom of the barrel, whether it's got 4.5 stars or not, or it's clearly, it may not be high quality. I'm buying for price. I'm not buying for quality and for brand. And I think there is a difference between the consumer that is buying for price and buying for quality, right? And so they understand that they need to go after, if they want to go after a high quality product for a company that's been around a long time, they're going to search for that, right? And so I think most brands probably worry a little too much about that. But at the same time, the biggest problem is that it takes away from their visibility. Because when you have, 30 of these brands showing up in search results, they're not, right? And so that's where I think they need to work harder at their SEO and their page optimization and the things that move the needle in terms of converting, so that when customers do show up on their page, that they're buying that product because it's a high quality page with images and video content and great bullets and great titles and A+ content, and giving the consumer every piece of information that they need to make that informed purchase decision. Because when that conversion goes up, those search rankings go up, and Amazon doesn't care whether it's a $20, a product that's crap quality or whether it's $100. They care about where's the conversion, where are they going to make the most money, where's the consumer clicking on a page and wanting to buy. That's where they start to surface those products. And so I think it's less about how do I price and more about how do I provide a really quality experience on Amazon and good content.
Yeah, totally. Sounds like the differentiation is not on price and more so on like the brand, the image, the messaging and content on that. So yeah, I love that. And then Josh, on the second question, for brands that have been vendors for a long time and that are experiencing some of these headwinds and challenges of selling through the vendor platform, what types of things would you be looking at if you were contemplating or trying to decide whether you should make the transition from Vendor Central to Seller Central? Because that's a big move for anybody to make. And I've been around conversations where brands are considering this, and it's probably important that they know what they're getting into. And then would love to just hear your thoughts about like what types of things are you looking at to be able to make that decision, and at what point does it make sense for a brand to actually transition?
Yeah, great question. So I think you have to look at it first off, at a top-down level of overall how many of those large issues are you experiencing? So really quick, let's talk about some of the big issues that brands have selling directly to Amazon on the Vendor Central platform. There's chargebacks and shortages, right? That Amazon is constantly killing your margin with those types of issues. There's pricing and vendor negotiations. When Amazon comes back to you once a year and wants higher terms for, a higher freight allowance, a higher damage allowance, higher MDF agreement. It's the inability to get cost increases. It's lost buy box to 3P sellers. It's lack of POs from Amazon. And it's price control, right? These are all the core issues on Vendor Central. So I think you have to kind of decide, like, where are these issues becoming overwhelming?
And you're about to give us the solution to all of them, right?
Right, exactly. And how many of those issues am I dealing with? And at what point is it too overwhelming and where I'm not going to move the needle quickly enough and I can't fix these problems? And you kind of have to decide, is it worth it to continue to sell on Amazon with the eroding margin? Or should I move to FBA? And so what I always encourage my clients to do, and I help them with this, is do a cost analysis, do a true breakdown. Amazon gives you tools to do that with the FBA calculator. So you can calculate based on your dimensions exactly, or very close to what it's going to cost you to sell on FBA. And then you calculate that up against, your margins on Amazon or on Vendor Central, and decide, where does it make more sense and where am I going to make more margin? Because ultimately it doesn't matter whether you're selling an FBA or selling directly to Amazon. Your momentum's not going to be affected. You're going to have the Prime badging as long as you can do it operationally. Do either one. And so some of my clients have a hybrid approach. For some of the catalog, it makes sense to continue to sell to Amazon. They don't experience as many issues with part of the catalog as they do with other parts of the catalog, and so they will sell some items directly to Amazon and other items on FBA. Now, if you're a larger vendor selling to Amazon, that gets really tricky because Amazon doesn't like that. They have something called an MOA policy, a manufacturer on Amazon policy, which states that if you, as a vendor, are selling to any other retailer outside of Amazon, then Amazon reserves the first right of refusal to buy that product from you. And so they will find out if you're a larger manufacturer, if you're selling on Seller Central as well, and they'll nip it in the bud. They'll make you stop. And I've seen that happen as well. But for these, smaller vendors that are, flying below the radar, don't necessarily have a vendor manager, or, the attention's not quite as hot and heavy on them, they can take that approach and sell part of the catalog on FBA if it makes more sense, margin-wise and operationally. So,
yeah, I've got one brand in particular that is on both. They have two brands on the Vendor Central side and then one brand on the Seller Central side. And for whatever reason, they're all the same product. They're all around the same price. They're all within the same industry. But for whatever reason, the Seller Central side of things is really firing, and the vendor side is just, there's zero organic visibility whatsoever. And we're really trying to troubleshoot that. And we've started testing, moving a couple of products over, and it seems to be going well. But someone told us, some other person was like, do not tell the vendor manager that you're doing this. If you do this, they're going to kill all your POs. They're going to try to send you out of business, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know if that's accurate or relevant, but for whatever reason, that's just kind of been the experience. But on that topic, I'm not sure if you're able to provide anything around any insights. I know it's the algorithm's a whole black box, but are you able to give anyone some kind of secret tips or rumors that you heard circling internally around how can you improve your ranking on Amazon? How can you get that better rank? How, particularly on the organic side, because we're putting a ton of media behind these a ton of spend behind these vendor items, and organic, they're just nowhere to be found on page one anywhere for these keywords, despite spending tens of thousands of dollars a month on like just one keyword, you know?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think the first question is, what product category are you in? And are you in an oversaturated product category? You know, I've worked with clients where the product that they're selling is not not differentiated in any way from any other product on there, and they're trying to sell it at a higher price. And you know, so it's really difficult to break into the top in terms of organic ranking, because you know there's nothing that sets them apart. And so I think examining the product category and how saturated it is number one. But beyond that, if let's say you're in a category where you should be able to compete, and you know there are a lot of inferior products, and I would say in that space, you need to understand the Amazon flywheel, right? And understanding how everything works together. So there is no single thing that by itself is going to take you to the top of organic search rankings. You have to have everything dialed in and working together, right? You have to have strong content, and you have to be winning the buy box and have all the SEO working for you, and you know, great images that are telling the customer exactly what they're buying to avoid a higher return rate. And you have to be advertising, right? At the same time, you guys know this, obviously, how important advertising is as a part of the flywheel, and advertising well, right? Not just auto campaigns, but targeting the right keywords and targeting the ones that are moving the needle. But everything has to be together and working together. Anything by itself isn't going to move the needle. So I think that's the most important piece to really truly start to see improvements in that organic ranking. And look at who is beating you out in an organic rank, and you know, figure out where their holes and gaps are and where you can, you know, jump ahead.
Yeah, totally. I love that. So you're basically saying that Vendor Central, this vendor is not being punished because they're on Vendor Central.
Yeah. So are you talking about the vendor who's trying to sell on seller at the same time?
Yeah. Like basically, I think he was trying to say that like he has a client that has brands on vendor and brands on seller, and the brand on seller is doing really good, but the brand on vendor like seems like it's being punished, kind of.
Yeah, no, they're not being punished. Amazon's gonna, you know, if they have a problem with something, they're gonna tell you. They're gonna slap you on the wrist and say, hey, don't do that. And honestly, the approach we take with our clients is almost do it innocently, and if you get called out on it, then say sorry later, you didn't know, kind of thing, right? Because Amazon's they don't want to lose your business, and they don't have any reason to punish you, because it's going to punish them. What they want is more money, right? And so, and that's what it ultimately comes down to, and they're not going to get more money by cutting you off. And so, yeah, I don't think that they're punishing them. I think it's more probably something else in the weeds.
To say it's probably more of like a algorithmic punishment, a little indirect punishment for something else going on. But awesome. Well, Josh, as we start to wrap up here, there's always one final question, or lately there's been one final question that we're asking people, and you can take this either way. You can take this the Vendor Central route or Amazon route, or if you can do share personal experience. But the question is, what's one thing that took you way too long to learn that you would have learned sooner?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. A lot. But, you know, and part of that is you don't know what you don't know. And I think understanding that concept right there, understanding that you don't know what you don't know, is huge. And if you get that, then you're already a step ahead, because you realize there's a lot of learning to do. And so it's really that it's that there is very little on Amazon that is a one size fits all, right, for brands. And even as a consultant, working with my brands, it's still something that I'm learning, is that, you know, because of that concept that there's very little that's a one size fits all. You've got to constantly be learning, constantly be staying up to date with Amazon's changing policies and fees, staying familiar with vendor and seller central platform features, learning about the different types of marketing levers and when you should use them. the varying challenges of different product categories on Amazon, and which would include, competition, ability to merchandise effectively on site, rules and regulations around specific categories, and anything else that might make it challenging for a brand to sell a specific product or category. So yeah, just understanding that every situation's unique, and, to not let you get that down, or let that get you down, but you got to figure out exactly, how to fix your own problems.
Yeah, I love that. And then if people are interested in finding more about you and connecting with you a little bit more, where should they go?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say probably the best way is to direct them to my LinkedIn. And then I can connect them internally with, whatever their needs may be. We can start the conversation there.
Awesome. Well, definitely check him out on LinkedIn. Josh, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise and your wisdom on Vendor Central with us. Everybody else, we'll see you next week on That Amazon Ads Podcast.